This video contains spoilers for both the 1998 Japanese film, Ring, and its 2002 American remake. There is disturbing imagery inbound, though I will not be playing any of the ear-piercing audio normally present. The American remake of The Ring made a massive cultural impact when it hit theaters. Samara and her spooky little video art essentially changed the course of American horror for years and years to come. One thing I have not really seen is a comprehensive breakdown of the iconic cursed VHS. It's not really meant to be dissected, and the filmmakers clearly made it to be a mostly impressionistic piece. I think there's value in picking it apart a little though, as it is something the entire movie seems to hinge around. In this video, I'm going to do two things for you. I'm going to guide you through each little snippet of the cursed videotape from the American Ring film, and then I'm going to walk you through its much shorter predecessor, the cursed tape from the original 1998 Japanese version of the film. Both franchises are rather large and sprawling, but I'm going to try to keep things mostly relevant to just the film they appear in, although I will have to dip into some sequel material for the Japanese version. The cursed VHS in the American film clocks in at just under 2 minutes, and features over 20 discrete clips. It seems to present two things: a not quite chronological telling of Samara's life, and her vague sort of manifesto about her views on humanity. These images were physically burnt onto tape by the angry and nihilistic ghost of a psychic girl left trapped at the bottom of a well for about 20 years. As she rested dormant, she slowly lost her mind, and by the time she was able to make her presence known, what remained of her mentality was twisted, deranged, and murderous. What we are seeing on this tape is essentially the nightmare of a powerful psychic ghost left to lose her mind at the bottom of a well. The tape begins with the iconic ring itself. This is eventually revealed to be a view from the bottom of the well in which Samara is trapped, a ring of light leaking past the well's circular lid. This image appears many times during the film as quick, subliminal images, and can also be found hidden within the prop and set design. After static, we cut to blood in rushing water. This is not the same footage as the horse's death later in the film, though it could be a premonition of it. The connection of water to death is a constant theme in this film, as Samara and both her parents would die in water. Next, a chair is seen in a sterile white room. This seems to be the same type of chair that Samara had in her barn loft room. It could also mimic the chair she sat in during the asylum interviews, though we never get a proper view of it. We very quickly see the chair move about and flicker, which hints towards a later clip. A surreal view of brush bristles combing through hair leads to the mirror scene. Samara's mother, Anna, brushes her hair in an oval mirror. Something catches her attention before the mirror shifts, showing a reflection of Samara disappearing in the darkness. The mirror shifts to show Anna again smiling. This mirror is seen later in the film in the Morgan house. This is likely a happy memory, with Samara recalling times with her mother, but the Samara we see is her dour, horrific ghost. This is a nice memory, tainted by what Samara has become. Blood dripping from a nail is seen very quickly after this, a preview of an upcoming clip. Samara's father, Richard, is seen in the window of his farmhouse. We see this clip again later in the film when Rachel visits the house, though Richard is not seen there. Next is seen a cliff overlooking the ocean. We later see that this is the cliff where Anna jumped to her death. A fly is seen on the screen, which Rachel would later peel out of a screen and into the real world. That will be the first time in the film that something exits the VHS and enters reality, and this foreshadows the film's final scare, in which Samara crawls out of television. The next clip is the strangest in my opinion, and the hardest to make sense of. For a while, I assumed this was foreshadowing the scene where Rachel pulled a Holter monitor cord out of her throat, but look, that is a line of intestines being pulled from a mouth. Furthermore, the teeth shown imply that this is a mix between a human mouth and a horse mouth. Samara's visions on this tape make a few parallels between humans and pests like insects and maggots. Does this create a parallel between humans and horses? As seen soon, she hates both, and both make her miserable. This clip could be her imagining lashing out and causing suffering to both. This could also be a premonition of her father's suicide. It's said that he loved the horses more than her, and as we see later, he would electrocute himself with the aid of a horse rein. Much like how Samara used to lead horses to their death in the ocean, Samara's legacy would lead her father to suicide in the bath. The next few clips come by very quickly. We first see a face struggling under black plastic. This is a memory of Samara being suffocated in a bag by her mother. Not the same footage though. We get a quick view from the bottom of the well as the lid slowly closes. Then, an artistic rendition of a burning tree. This is the tree that Samara had been looking at just before being thrown into the well, and it is a tree that we see multiple times, backlit by sun as to appear as if it is on fire. This tree is seen burnt into the walls of Samara's room, though the tree is not even on the same island that the Morgans lived on. Maybe it's something they saw on vacations, or maybe it is a premonition Samara had of her own death. If this is true, and if Samara could see the future while alive, as could Sadako in the Japanese film, then one must imagine that young Samara may have known of her own upcoming murder ahead of time. We next see a finger pushing down over a nail as hinted at in the earlier bloody nail clip. This likely recalls the pain of Samara scratching helplessly at the walls of the well. The next two clips shows a mass of maggots which transitions into a huge mass of bodies writhing in water or mud. I believe this is a philosophical stance on humanity made on Samara's behalf. After a tough life of being a hated pariah, and left to fester as an angry ghost in a well for years, this image implies, to me, that she views humanity as pests, as vermin. This is reinforced by the next clip, in which a giant centipede crawls out from under a table. The table is the same table at which sat Dr. Scott, the psychologist who interviewed Samara in the asylum. Same glass of water even. When Samara remembers Dr. Scott, this is how she remembers him, as an insect, as a pest. A centipede would show up in the real world later just before Rachel watches the footage of Dr. Scott talking to Samara. This is likely a hallucination that Samara gives to Rachel. Interestingly, the centipede shows up as Rachel thumbs through the adoption papers for Samara, almost as if Samara is comparing herself to an insect. A minor theme of self-loathing can be seen here. Keeping with a theme of self-loathing, the next clip is footage of a three-legged goat limping out of the frame. There are no goats anywhere in the film or in Samara's life, so I think the fact that this creature has a birth defect is what's important. Besides being a confusing visual suitable for a nightmare, this may display that Samara thinks of herself as a deformity or a mistake. We now see a close-up of a horse's eye. This footage is taken directly from later in the movie, where Rachel encounters a caged horse, which then escapes and jumps to its death. We again see the well from the bottom, its lid closing further in. A box of 7 severed fingers is seen next. Could this represent the 7 days the viewer has until death? Samara must have thought about fingers a lot in the well as she clawed hers against the brick walls. The burning tree then returns, as does the footage of a face suffocated by plastic. Samara's mother is seen again looking at the mirror, but this time we see her and not just her reflection. She turns to look back at the camera, which is Samara, but does not smile this time. After years of being essentially tortured by her adopted psychic child, Anna's love for Samara has disappeared, and it is likely that Samara knew this. The now empty window of Samara's home is seen, with her adoptive father nowhere to be found. This is once again the same footage we see when Rachel is actually at the house, but with clouds added in. The chair is seen again, this time spinning in the air. What was once meant to be comfortable has been entirely distorted into the disturbing. A ladder is then seen leaning against the wall. This mirrors a ladder Rachel would later walk under, a classic sign of bad luck of course. As seen in just a second, a ladder has an extra meaning to Samara. Bodies of horses are now seen on the shore. Samara used to use her powers to compel horses to drown themselves at sea, as she would do again in the film with Rachel as her conduit. Next we see Samara's mother. Much like the horses that Samara would compel to suicide, Anna would throw herself into the ocean. Samara, left to die in the water, would send both her parents to a watery grave. We then see a ladder fall. From this height and angle, this is likely the ladder that led to Samara's room in the barn. If the ladder was to fall while she was up there, she would be trapped with no way down. One can imagine how many times that might have happened, and how that might terrify someone at Samara's age, and how much worse it would be to be trapped at the bottom of a well. The well now closes, fully forming the ring of light that Samara would see as she died. Before breaking into static, the VHS ends with a view from outside the uncovered well. Each time this tape is watched as the movie progresses, more hints of Samara's emergence is seen until, finally, she breaches into reality for a final attack. Now, let's move on to the cursed tape from the 1998 Japanese version. This section contains a couple of Japanese names that I'm not super good at pronouncing, so please forgive me. Compared to its remake, it is much shorter and much simpler, with only 7 clips. This is much less of a symbolic nightmare, and more a series of clues for the characters to follow. If you look at the wider canon of sequels and novels, Sadako's motivations are much different and a little more complex than Samara's. But if you look at just this film in isolation, then it seems to me that Sadako burned these images onto tape specifically so that she could be found, and so that her curse could spread. The video opens with a circular view of the sky as a figure looks down at the camera. This is Sadako's view from the bottom of the well. The figure looking at us is most likely Sadako's father. He's the one who killed her in this canon, though that isn't said in this film. Nearly identical to the clip from the American remake's VHS, the next clip shows Shizuko, Sadako's mother, brushing her hair in the mirror. The mirror then briefly moves, showing the reflection of the ominous Sadako, before again showing Shizuko, who smiles. The mirror, or at least a mirror very similar, will later be seen in the inn run by Sadako's cousin once removed. We are then treated to a nearly impenetrable wall of Japanese text. Later in the film, the main characters will find that this is a reproduction of a newspaper article discussing the eruption of Mount Mahara and the possibility that a young local woman may have predicted it. Next, people are seen to writhe on the ground or stumble around. Although it may remind you of the massive writhing bodies from the American remake, this most likely just shows people suffering the eruption of Mount Mahara. The next clip is the most mysterious. It shows a man wearing a white towel over his head, pointing to the right, with the rolling ocean behind him. Fans online call him Towel Man, and no one seems very sure who he's meant to be. This figure appears twice more in the film, first appearing over the empty bed of Reiko's son, pointing to where he is watching the video. He later appears at the end, dressed in Ryuji's clothes, pointing to the cursed tape, and leading Reiko to conclude that she must copy the tape to save her son's life. If we read more into the fact that Yoichi, Reiko's son, says that Tomoko told him to watch the cursed tape, then it's possible that Sadako's tape traps people as ghosts. If the towel man in Ryuji's clothing is his ghost, then maybe the first shown in the VHS itself is some other, older victim of Sadako. As discussed in the film itself, speech is slowly played over this part in the video. The subtitles provided to American audiences suggest that it translates to "Frolic and brine, goblins be thine," but this seems to be an overly quirky interpretation of the Japanese line. Fans online suggest that a more accurate translation is, "If you just keep playing in the water, the monsters come for you." This ties everything back to the general mythos of water and the sea present in both versions. The eye of, presumably, Sadako is seen. Reflected in the eye is the kanji symbol for Sada, the first part of Sadako's name. It can translate to virtue or chastity, which is more relevant to the greater Ring story in the novels and sequels. The cursed tape ends with a view of the well in the field. Each time this clip is seen as the film progresses, Sadako slowly climbs further out of it, until she finally ascends and breaks into reality. To conclude my findings, Samara's videotape is very specific to the film itself, and even specific to Rachel's endeavors to solve the mystery. Much of what is shown would only make sense to Rachel, given the timing of her watching the tape and the hallucinations that Samara gives her. As a whole, it draws comparisons between people and vermin, as well as comparing people with horses. Sadako's tape is simultaneously much more direct and more cryptic. The footage is essentially a short roadmap of clues that hope to lead someone to finding Sadako's life and struggles. But there are also elements to it that could not truly be known without knowledge of the sequels and the novel. Important to note here is that when Ring released to theaters in 1998, its sequel, Spiral or Rosin, simultaneously was released with it. The two are meant to be seen together, so there are themes and lore that could only be known by watching both. I have not watched both. I don't plan to, because if I start investing that much time into it, then I'll want to watch all the other sequels, then I'll probably be compelled to do some hour-long video about the lore, and ugh. One interesting link between the two renditions is their link to water and the sea. The ocean acts as some sort of quiet, malevolent spirit affecting both versions of these tortured ghosts. I get the sense that the Japanese film treats this force as an entity with malicious intent, while the American film treats the ocean and death by water as a sort of unknowing, compulsive inevitability. I hope you found this interesting. I have more videos on the way, so please subscribe so you don't miss them. Until I see you again, please take care of yourself. Its sequel, Spiral or Rosin, or maybe it's not Raisin.